Last story for the night. We're talking about if you've seen the title of the episode, you'll know that we're talking about some Luxon hypocrisy. We'll get to why it's hypocrisy shortly, because there's a first part about this story where, whilst it's acknowledged very clearly that Luxon's done nothing wrong, it is a bit strange in a world where Luxon's message, National's message, is continually government waste, government spending too much, government spending too much spending by government, that some of that spending is being used to pay for his offices, his local body offices, which he owns. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with this in the rules of engagement, the rules of Parliament, but he owns the property. Government pays him the rent to rent that property. Now, all I'm saying is, in a world where he's screaming about government spending too much, to be a beneficiary of some of that excess spending, it's an interesting optics thing. Let's play the story. You can have a look at it first of all.
Christopher Luxon is charging the taxpayer a cool $45,000 a year to rent an office for himself, from himself.
The National leader's one of just 6 MPs who do it, but says he's very comfortable with the arrangement. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch.
Beaming out from a botany corner, Christopher Luxon's electorate office, an office he owns and rents.
I'm very comfortable with it. Parliamentary services are incredibly comfortable with it.
You very comfortably heard that right. In March 2020, 4 months after he was selected as candidate for botany, Christopher Luxon bought this prime corner spot for an office. Now he rents it to the taxpayer. So
just think about the timeline there. Again, he's within the rules, very clear. He became the nominee. He then bought the property. He then funded the purchase of the property off the taxpayer. Now, if he had have already owned the property, there'd probably be a different vibe to it. But he became the nominee. He then bought the property. He then started charging you and me to pay off his mortgage on his property. Or, I mean, assuming he's got a mortgage on it, if he doesn't and he bought it freehold, then we're just lining his pockets some more. Again, within the rules, he's not doing anything. I can't say wrong because that has a moral element to it. He's not breaking any laws or any rules. But it's an interesting vibe, and we'll tell you shortly why there is a little bit more hypocrisy to this than just even what we've explained so far.
Now he rents it to the taxpayer so he can use it as an office to serve his constituents. Mixed comfortability among them.
Not something I would be very comfortable, especially with the cost of living such a high.
I'm quite comfortable with that.
Topping the office perks, Christopher Luxon's $45,000. Then comes Labour's Tracy McClellan and Jenny Salesa, both offices owned by the Labour Party.
Interesting that your friend here, Jenna Lynch, that uses a couple of examples for office perks to compare them to Mr. Luxon, but those two individuals don't own the offices. Says are owned by the Labour Party. So the other two MPs, the Labour MPs, aren't personally profiting from this. Christopher Luxon is. So whilst this is all correct again, these are the office perks. The biggest number, Christopher Luxon, he personally benefits from it. The next two Labour Party MPs, the Labour Party benefits from it. So there is a slight difference there, and interesting that it's just all thrown in together like it's the same thing.
National's Jackie Dean rents her office back to herself as well. Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta rents her office for $13,000. It's not owned by her, but it's on Māori land, and she's a member of the iwi that owns it. National's Paul Goldsmith didn't get his returns in on time, but he told News Hub he charges $958 a month, the thriftiest of the lot.
So she wasn't quite clear about Goldsmith there, but what it sounds like to me is that the 3 National MPs all personally profit from this. The 2 Labour MPs at the top, the Labour Party profits from this, and the Nanaia Mahuta's tribe or iwi profit from it. So the 3 people who are getting a personal profit from this completely within the rules perk are National Party MPs. Just interesting to be completely clear and aware of that.
Yeah.
It's all signed off by parliamentary services and they pay below market rent.
Monthly market rent on Luxon's property is listed as $3,833. He's undercutting that by a whopping $83. His annual rent paycheck just shy of $1,000 more than a minimum wage worker's annual earnings.
What's important to me.
Can I say something about that last comment there? It doesn't mean anything. I mean, comparing it to a minimum wage, who cares? I'm sure the Prime Minister's, if the Prime Minister had an office in central Wellington on the 10th floor, it would be 3 times the minimum wage. That's just tittle tattle. The comparing it to that doesn't matter. If that's what it rents, that's what it rents for. But anyway, now this is a very important piece to listen to, Chewy. That's why I've come back a couple of seconds, because I'm going to compare this to something else shortly. You ready? Here we go.
Annual earnings.
What's important to me is that I follow all the rules and the rules are followed, and that parliamentary services are good with it, and they are. All right, thanks so much. Take care.
There is no suggestion that Christopher Luxon has broken any rules. In fact, his office even helpfully dropped off his parliamentary services permission slip to prove that he hasn't. This is about optics, and while Christopher Luxon may be comfortable with his rent arrangement, arguing that the government is misspending taxpayer money when you're skimming some off the top is a hard argument to win. Jenna.
Right. So let me just repeat to you very clearly, and then I'll give you a crack. Then we'll go on to the hypocrisy bit. Mr. Luxon said very clearly, and I wrote these down, it was signed off by parliamentary services, and he said, quote, what's important to me is that I follow all the rules. And he has. No one's suggesting that rules aren't followed here. But Mr. Luxon is saying this is above board and this is fine because it's within the rules. Chewy, yours.
Yeah. There has, to agree with you, if someone else has signed off on this and it's within the standing rules at the moment, yeah, cool. No criticism of it, really. It hits my, it's not morally right, though, gland pretty square.
Hang on, have you got a moral gland?
Yes, I do.
Gland?
Yeah.
Is it the kind of gland you milk?
Throbs. It throbs when Christopher Luxon's trying to do something.
Tell us about your moral gland, Chewy.
No, it's just there's obviously a problem with the rules in this case that parliamentary services are going, well, it's in the handbook. Like, what is the reason for having an electorate office? And I think we can extend this out to what is the reason that they're allowed to get money for their Wellington accommodation? You know, going back years, like Bill English got pinged for this. Well, when I say pinged for it, he got slapped, and then we all moved on to something else about owning properties and then getting parliamentary services to pay for it.
Bill English's one was interesting because he lived in Wellington, but he listed his primary residence being Clutha because that's where he was an MP for. Yeah, but he lived in Wellington, which means he was able to get money for the Wellington property, which he owned and lived in, and his kids went to school in Wellington. Yeah, because it wasn't listed as his primary residence, even though that was where he lived. So his was, even though within the rules, that was pretty dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot of conversation about it, and then apparently nothing has changed. On the other side of things, like I remember when Trevor Mallard stopped being the electorate MP and Ginny Anderson took over, she looked at the arrangements around how her electorate office in Petone was done. It was owned by, I think, one of the trade unions, and it was rented back, and it was very much an agreement that she wasn't comfortable with, put it that way. But I think these sort of things show that these rules are not fit for purpose. Like, the purpose is, if you're an MP, you should have an office. If you're an MP, you should have somewhere to stay in Wellington. But it's not carte blanche to pay the mortgage on your family home because you've moved to Wellington, or you've got an electorate office that is, from the looks of it, a 2 or 3 bedroom home. You know, and you go, oh no, it's my office. Yeah, but it's something worth $1.2 million.
Yeah,
that you own, and you've got the cash to go in and just buy it. You know, maybe they should be recompensed in the same way that someone that has a work from home office it's able to be tax deductible through the IRD. It's done by square footage or how much it's used or something like that, rather than have someone just go, oh yeah, well, it's a property I own and I reckon fair market rate is I'll do it a bit cheaper for you, but I'll do it this, which is definitely market rent. It doesn't seem right.
So I want to say again, we haven't actually got to the hypocrisy bit yet, okay? Because even though it's a bad look, rallying against the the government for wasting money and spending too much while you yourself are a beneficiary of some extra money. This is not the hypocrisy bit yet. We're going to get to the hypocrisy bit now. Because remember what Mr. Luxon said is, what is important to me is that I follow all the rules. And this was signed off on by Parliamentary Services. So, are you ready, baby birds? I'm going to feed you. Here it comes. Do you think he had the same position with Nanaia Mahuta? When her things were signed off by Parliamentary Services and she followed all the rules. Because remember, what's most important to me is that I follow all the rules. What happened when Nanaia Mahuta followed all the rules? What was the situation there? Well, here he is talking to Chris Lynch out of Christchurch. Let's hear what Mr. Luxon had to say about Nanaia Mahuta.
Questions, of course, have been raised about Nanaia Mahuta having close family members appointed to influential and lucrative government contracts and
all within
advisory
the
positions
rules,
dealing directly with their portfolios. Winston Peters appears worried by this. Are you?
Yeah, look, they're quite serious allegations, and they're really a set of questions the minister needs to answer in the coming weeks, because it's not just about a real conflict of interest, it's also about a perceived conflict of interest. And
so see, when it's Nanaia Mahuta, perception matters, even if it's within the rules. When it's Mr. Luxon, perception doesn't matter. It's only about the rules. Isn't that strange? There's a little bit more here for you, Chewy.
As you know, perception is a really important thing, particularly in a public servant. So, look, they are serious questions. We'll be asking those questions in Parliament over the next few weeks as well. So, yeah, the serious allegations that the minister needs to answer for them and reassure the public and probably the Prime Minister that, you know, there is no real conflict and there's no perceived conflict either.
Well, even if there was a perceived conflict, the minister's obviously, I understand, put out a statement suggesting, you know, that conflict was dealt with because she took a back step while there were appointments being made. So is this just a bit of scuttleness during the media rounds, or do you believe the minister needs to put this to bed once and for all and perhaps come out with a more concrete statement?
I think there's probably a bit more definitive answers that are needed to answer some of those questions. And I think, you know, we'll be prosecuting that over the next couple of weeks in Parliament as well.
So he was very, very keen to make sure that issues surrounding Nanaia Mahuta were either not real or even a perceived conflict. Whereas it doesn't seem to have that same concern about himself.
No, I think he said he was very comfortable with it.
Perception is so important. What did he say? Perception is really important for a public servant. That's what he said about Nanaia Mahuta. A perceived conflict of interest. So he's not even suggesting that she's broken the rules because she didn't. Right? Now, where we, my friends out there in the World Wide Web, will be consistent is we thought that what Nanaia Mahuta did was inappropriate. And we said very strongly that the situation that she was in was not appropriate. So what you're not going to get from us is a couple of ideologues who go, oh, basically do what Luxon's doing, like give Nanaia a pass and slam Christopher Luxon. We said of Nanaia Mahuta that she should not have had her family members working in that situation, even though she didn't break any rules. If you've got a minister above you, there is a perception of power that may influence the decision. We said of her husband getting contracts from the government, this is what I put out there. If you sleep in the bed with someone who gets contracts that sends money into your personal bank account, as a minister, you should not be doing that. That should be outlawed. So we're being consistent here, saying Nanaia Mahuta shouldn't have done that. And now we're saying Christopher Luxon is in the same sort of perceived situation and he shouldn't be doing it either. It shouldn't be allowed. We're not playing the ideological game. We're playing the consistency game here. Christopher Luxon is not. He is being hypocritical.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to Mahuta as well, we said a very similar thing. Well, if this is within the rules, then maybe we need to look at the rules. And yeah. I mean, I hand on heart, I don't know how parliamentary services review their policies and procedures. I'm sure there's a whole rigmarole to it, but I think for the amount of times the issues around MPs' residences and electoral offices come up, then maybe it's time to actually review that. and
look,
actually have a look at what it is.
And I think you're right. And Sean says this, yeah, you seem to be surprised, Pat, that Luxon can talk out both sides of his mouth. That is a must for a national party leader, surely. No, I'm not surprised by it, Sean. I'm just committing to you guys that when we see it from any politician, we will call it out.